Welcome to Mindfulness Manufacturing. My name is Trevor Blondeel. Spending 25 years in manufacturing, I discovered the real impact we have on turnover, communication, and the ability to manage change is how we show up. That's the essence of emotional intelligence. In each episode, we bring a guest or message to expand your skills, engage your people, and grow your organization. So let's jump in. We have been talking often about retention and recruitment and just being difficult in manufacturing. One area that can compound this is launching a brand new plant, a Greenfield site. I've been a part of it. I've got a guest on today who's been a part of it, and it is an experience you never forget. And if you've been part of it, then you know what it's like. But today we're going to kind of walk you through that. And today's guest, Dan Knecht, is the Solar Projects Director for the NSG Group. This group makes a lot of glass and is over 100 years old. Dan's focus is on leading strategic projects which support the renewable energy market. We met in Toledo, the glass city capital, some people have called it, at your office, Dan, and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Trevor. I'm thrilled to be here.
So Dan, you were the one that led this dirt field into this manufacturing plant. How big was it?
So the facility is about 500,000 square feet. It was a large capital investment, and it employs around 160 individuals.
And so I got to experience, meeting you before it was, even built. And then, we worked together a little bit, through that process and your leadership. And one of the amazing results, which is why you're on the show, is people, right? I mean, you got 500,000 square feet with 160 people, and the ability for you to retain and then have that plant launched successfully, for you to be able to step away, go on with your career, and then have it sustained today. Dude, this is just a great story. Excited to have you on here.
Thank you. As I said, I'm thrilled to be here. Certainly enjoy your podcast. A really long list of distinguished guests, so I'm happy to be here, even though it took me 4 years of begging to get on here.
And Dan said, I thought you were just asking me because you wanted to get more business out of me. And I was like, no, I really wanted your story. So no, I appreciate us going back and forth. And I'll be honest, I do talk to different, senior leaders in manufacturing plants, and some people are hesitant to come on the show because they're afraid, for legal reasons or whatnot. So I'm grateful that NSG and yourself is willing to do that, because it's good to talk about some of our mistakes, but it's also good to talk about how did we get through it, what can we accelerate our community in mindfulness manufacturing, and what lessons can we share with our listeners. So what's let's take it back a little bit, Dan. What's the foundation? How did you get through this? I know you got an engineering background, and when I met you, we talked about some personality profiling and some different areas in that aspect, and I was like, wow, this guy is a senior leader, very technical, extremely smart, but he's very curious about people. So where did this come from?
Yeah, I guess I would just say, early in my career, what kept me coming back to NSG was, we are an innovator, and, there's a strong technical aspect, and I thoroughly enjoyed my time. But surprisingly, maybe surprising myself, as I transitioned into initially engineering management, and then certainly beyond into, manufacturing, customer service, business, strategic planning, I've come to find that, while I love the technical aspect and I still have that in my job, it's the people. It's all about the people. I love the opportunity to network and collaborate. But more importantly, as I've developed in my career, there's nothing more rewarding than managing through others and seeing others have success and then be recognized and rewarded for their success. And, as a leader, to steer the ship, set the strategy, and then really tear down barriers and get out of the people's way so that they can be the best that they can be. I take a lot of delight in that. So, yeah.
So for our listeners, if there's an engineer right now listening, leading a plant, and it's hard when we're hardwired, because I know I went through it where from my aspect, it was, I just like to get a lot of tasks done. And sometimes I would create some carnage along the way because I didn't pay attention to the people all the time. So how did you start to shift your behavior? Because you're technically minded, but then you started to get that enjoyment out of those relationships. And you said said, you had to launch that plant leading through others. And sometimes that can be really
Yes.
hard to do when you're really smart. So what did you have to do different with yourself and be mindful of that you didn't micromanage and that you led and you grew your team so you could step away?
Well, I think it's the whole starting point is building the right team. I should mention that, the operation piece is the big challenge. But Trevor, there was a 2-year process of site selection,
Mm.
design work, collaboration with R&D, and a lot of activity going on. And the first thing I did was build the direct staff, so the leaders that were my direct reports. And we took about 2/3 of those from existing NSG sites who applied for this new opportunity. And then we brought a third in of fresh talent. And we were heavily slated towards internal because we always value promotion within.
Mm-hmm.
And also, we recognized that the hourly workforce was going to be largely folks that had absolutely zero, not just glassmaking, but manufacturing experience. So it was imperative that I had a strong team. But the key to me is there are leaders, and I will say not the best in my view, that they have their mission or agenda, and they want folks that are going to think just like them.
Mm.
And my view was to hire that strong team that could respectfully challenge each other. If I'm wrong, Trevor, I want to be told I'm wrong. And so you have to set yourself up with a team that's going to make you better. You can't solve all the problems. You can't address every area. So you've got to have a team, and your job is to pull that team together and get them rowing in the same direction. But still, there's going to need to be that healthy tension of being able to challenge each other as you progress. So I don't know if that answers a question on the starting foundation.
Well, when you hold that title of plant manager, it's a heavy title, right? So people are maybe a little more tense, can be a little more tense around that person because they know the pressure that you're under and that the autonomy that you have and usually want to make you happy with them. So sometimes challenging you, and I've seen it and I've heard it many times, but I don't always see it demonstrated where it's like, yeah, I want my people to challenge me, unless I just want my own decisions and I just want to do it the way I am. So
Yeah.
what's the difference between just saying it and how did you actually create the behavior? Like, how did you actually create that behavior of making people comfortable challenging you?
Well, Trevor, I think you often mention authenticity. That's a key. You mentioned being able to show your own vulnerability. And it really starts with, not just my staff, but when we started hiring hourly folks, we would do, extensive training. And remember, we started this up in the midst of COVID, and we started hiring before we even had a finished site. So we were renting church halls, basements, you name it, different places that we could bring in, large groups. And typically on the second or third day, I would go and do an introduction from the plant manager with all the hourly. And one trick I used really just to establish that trust, connection, and authenticity is, we would generate badges and photos for all the new hires. So by the night after all those photos were available, I would create a PowerPoint with their names and faces. And when I would go in, it was easy when it was 4 to 7 people because we brought them in waves.
Yeah.
But I'm here to tell you it was a little more challenging when the groups were 20. But I would memorize people's names to the face. So when I would first meet them, I would go around the room and test my memory on whether I had their name right or not. Thankfully, I was successful. But the other thing is my team saw that what I was doing, and I made those PowerPoints available to the whole team. Now operationally, we have a electronic reporting system that we manage some of our HR activities in, and we have picture rosters directly available. But it was making some tools and recognizing, despite all the technical challenges of finishing out the design and construction, I needed to start investing that time with the people up front. And in that session, it wasn't just about the feel good of knowing who's what. It was the fact that I shared the vision, the mission for our facility, the expectations, not just for them, but of myself, the honesty, the integrity. If you make a mistake, own up to it. I'm not here to chastise or criticize, or it's not fatal to make a mistake, as long as you learn from it and don't keep repeating those mistakes. So I think you start to build that it's not just words, it's not just lip service. When you it's like anything, you have to demonstrate it. Talk is cheap. It's in the actions and how you demonstrate it.
I mean, that's a great tip for our listeners. There was a plant that I had worked at, and this was like 25 years ago, and his name still gets brought up. And it was a plant of over 1,000 people. people. He knew everybody's name and a lot of their family. And he was the assistant plant manager. There's a few of them that were leading the plant, but he still gets talked about today. And the reason that people really, I think, elevated to him is just because he was out there. And then, I work with other plants, and it's like, man, like we hardly ever see our leader, and does he even know who I am? And and I think the quantity of people can become an excuse, where it's like, do you have a PowerPoint? Are you intentional when you're in a smaller meeting? Do you take moments to connect? Do you share that vision? Just, man, like that's a great example of like, just be strategic and be intentional and get in front of it, and don't get caught up into all the administrative part of the job.
Right.
So was that a challenge, Dan? Because you obviously you were connecting with people, but it wasn't like you didn't have enough to follow up on in a plant Greenfield launch.
Yeah, it was a challenge, but I've been fortunate in my career, to have a really strong foundation in my personal life, and I gave a lot to this startup. It was, I'm going to say, a life-changing event, and you've been through the Greenfield startup. It is, I'm not going to kid anybody, it is a lot of work. It's almost, when you get to that point where you can back off, it's hard to learn how to idle the engine down, but what I will say is, it starts with a good foundation. I will be the first to say that my wife, she's the GM of our family life.
I love it.
Excellent. She's just, she has sacrificed her own career to organize our household, which, by the way, includes an adult special needs child that we have. And so she has made, whether it's relocation for different job opportunities, or just even in the case of Lucky, where I was home every night, but very late nights, the personal sacrifices that she has made have been tremendous to me. And I think, I look forward to the day, and sometime down the road in retirement, where, we can have some enjoyable time for that. And then, honestly, the way I was raised up, I'd be remiss to not mention, my parents were two of the best role models anybody could. I have just been so blessed in life with my family. They raised 9 kids on one salary. I was the baby. I like to say, when you stop with perfection, right, Trevor? So I was the last of 9. But my dad worked in skilled trade in the printing industry. The amount of sacrifices that man made, to give his kids a better life, all of which we lost one brother when he was 19, but the rest of my family either went to college or skilled trade schooling. And the sacrifices this man made to be able to do that for us, it instilled in me, some virtues that I think are critical for leadership. And to me, those are humility and the ability to put the team before yourself. So yes, it was an investment. Yes, it was hard to stay up on top of things, but I felt like, the preparation I did going into those first employee meetings were imperative to setting the right tone on the culture of the plant that we wanted to establish.
And you were blessed with, having that experience, with your parents, and not everybody has that, but, part of the reason for this podcast is that it's retelling the story. The stories are important, right? And
yes.
it's like, okay, so I can live through your story, because I know that patience is something that it took me so long, and I'm still sometimes I catch myself almost daily. But with your kids and with your daughter, and it must have really helped you be more patient, because that is something that when I hear people talk about you, they do say that you're there, you're present, you listen. Like, it seems like you have that patience, and that's hard to do through a launch.
Yeah, and it hasn't always been that way, Trevor. If I reflect back on my career, being all totaled with the NSG Group around about 27 years, I've always been fortunate to work for an organization that gives you some autonomy to make a difference. Challenge every day is a challenge. But what keeps me coming back is that I think the recognition and the career opportunities are there for those that take the initiative and seize the opportunities in front of them. But as a young engineer, very passionate and driven, as one leader described, that fire in the belly. I'm going to be the first to admit that I have a temper, and in times of frustration, that could come from sort of a bottled up location into an explosion of anger, especially in a manufacturing environment. And your long history, I'm sure you know where I'm coming from. But I would say is the first half of my career, I absolutely did not manage my temper quite so well. I was always able to. It wasn't to the detriment of my career. I was always able to manage the situation after the fact. But boy, I'm telling you, I had some conversations conversations that I deeply regretted whether I did long-term damage with
Mm-hmm.
those individuals. And, one key aspect is the guy who happens to be my boss currently, 15 years ago, he was head of our North American manufacturing, and I worked for the plant manager in our largest North American manufacturing site in architectural glass. And he was having some career path discussions, so kind of some skip level. He was a couple levels above me at the time. And I'll never forget his words were, clearly the word had gotten out about, the fact that I could have a temperament that would exhibit itself. And, his comments were, your career has a bright future here with the company, but, I need to talk to you a little bit about this anger situation. And he said, he was very clear, passion, that fire in the belly, those are good tools to have. Even anger can be a good tool if you manage it rather than letting it manage you. So he looked me in the eyes and he said, can you do that? And I said, yes, I can. I mean, I paused for a second, but I said, yes, I can. What was I going to say? No, I'm out of here, So he was buying
Good
lunch
answer.
that day, So anyway, he said, now you're sure about that? And I said, yes. And, as I said, fast forward, our careers have meandered a little bit here and there, but for the past 6 years, he's actually been my direct boss. And I often kid him about that, the fact that it's clear to me that he has seen that I've lived up to my word. He might have been skeptical at first. As I said, actions speak louder than words. It's how you really put it into action. But I when he talks about, you did a good job in that situation, I said, well, a wise man once told me. And
Nice callback.
I give him grief about that. But yeah. So and I would say, there's other examples of what not to do. If I go back to my first job out of college, it was a local engineering firm, close to where I grew up, close to where I went to school, and we specialized in electrical and control systems. And I was this green engineer, entry-level wage. It was a small company. I had to work whatever hours I needed to do to get the job done. No overtime compensation, but I just kept grinding it out, telling myself it was a good job, and because I was learning a lot. And I'll never forget, probably about 6 months in, I was going to see this client who wasn't the easiest to deal with. And the owner of the company came to me and said, hey, you're going to see such and such client. They're past due on our milestone payments, and I need you to tell them that you're going to have to stop working on the project if they don't pay up.
Uh-oh.
And so this is the owner of the company putting this on this entry-level engineer. So I paused for a second, and whether I felt it was my place or not, I said, yeah, okay, I understand. And when I respectfully, I said, I understand, and I'll address it. And his immediate response is, no, you don't understand. You're still getting your paycheck. You'd understand if I quit paying you until they paid me. And I will tell you, that seems like, okay, people deal with this on a, if that's the worst thing that happened to you in your career, it's not that big of a deal. But I remember this to this day, because here was a guy that owned the company, that drove a Cadillac, that had a fancy house in this exquisite golf course region, northwest of Columbus. And, he was telling a guy that is scraping by on an entry-level wage, paying off student loans, living in an apartment, and, driving the cheapest car he could find, counseling me on, I should have kissed his ring that he was still keeping my paychecks coming. And so I obviously, temper or not, I kept my tongue, and I was smart
in that situation.
But absolutely, what flabbergasted me is 6 months later, when I tendered my resignation, he came to me offering me more than, he asked me what I was making at my new job. I was honest, and I tried to tell him it wasn't about the money. Of course, I didn't give him as blunt feedback as I'm sharing with you today. Yeah. But he was just blown away that I wouldn't stay. And I heard from some dear friends back at the company that a couple months later, as a few more people left, he was bemoaning his fate that he brings these folks in out of college, he gives them some training and development, and then other people snatch them up. I don't think to this at the time, I didn't realize the lesson that taught me, but I turned that into a positive. I learned how not to treat people, Trevor, no matter what level of the organization they're in. There's plenty of ways he could have reacted, but to me, the key lesson is it's not in the good times. It's in that moment of adversity. Yes. How you respond, as you would say, how you show up, is the defining moment in what people will remember. I learned a lot. I have disciplines that I use to this day from that job, but I'll I'll never forget 28 years ago, the way he made me feel and the way I saw him
Yeah.
treat others. He controlled his own destiny on his retention, and he wasn't even smart enough to realize it.
It's funny, and I've been caught in moments in my career where I've seen some behaviors which I didn't admire, but for whatever reason, I started emulating them because I thought, okay, that's how my boss is like, then I should try to be like that a little bit. And unfortunately, I got out of that because I had a real disconnect between my own values and then how I was behaving, and it was probably the worst part in my career because I had a very good position of influence, and that was very compounding in a negative aspect, right? Because if I'm starting to try a little bit more pressure, and those little comments, like you get an intern, they don't own the company, they're not going to behave in the same way. But is that conversation helpful? Absolutely not.
No. He could have let it go, completely let it go.
Yeah.
But you see, you raise a good point. I mean, there's a reason there's an adage that says you lead how you're led. You're not the only one who had a leader and that operated in a certain way, and you tend, whether it's subconscious or not, to take on those characteristics. So recognition of that as a general manager, a site manager, or some position high in the organization, you have to recognize the responsibility that comes with that. Because if you're exhibiting bad behaviors and people tend to lead how they're led, as you're sort of touching on, the damage that can do as it trickles down the organization is, it could magnify tenfold very quickly. So I think that's something, the challenge I think for us is, if we happen to have a leader that exhibits some things that don't match our ethics and values or principles, missions, how we break that mold and don't just adopt those behaviors. Yeah. And so I've at times viewed my job as kind of a buffer between the folks that I need for me to be in my operation to be successful, and
absolutely,
and influences above and beyond or to the side of us.
We have a responsibility as leaders to allow our people to focus on what they're responsible for. They are not our counselors. They are not right. They are not just some people at the bottom of the hill where it's going to roll down. That is the exact opposite. Our job is to stop that from rolling down so they can accomplish their goals. And I just love the way that you summarize that. And man, this time's already going by so fast. So I'm just going to do a little summary of kind of what you said here. You started out about hiring. Number one was, you're hiring the right people. You're investing into those people, like those conversations that you're having. And I love the fact of, and you've said this to me, there's never too much communication. You talked about sharing that vision right up the front. I know I've stopped by your plant and you had the town hall meetings. You got everybody together. Everybody got the consistent message, and then you leading by example, right? And that is probably, to me, one of the most powerful one is that when I see you talking calmly to someone that's made a costly mistake and you're just trying to figure it out with them, then I'm going to do the same. And then keeping the finger on the pulse of the team, making adjustments. That's got to be an interesting one. So I'm going to try to wrap us up with this. But I loved how you talked about how your boss, kind of gave you some of that feedback. And I just wonder, as you go through Greenfield launch, you're going to have emotional days. You're going to have days where I know how many hours you guys were in there at a time. We're not going to say it, but it was a lot. But in those moments, like keeping your finger on the pulse of the team and then making those adjustments, that had to be a lot of like just having those harder conversations, because I'm sure you ran into one of your people being angry and you had to give them the same gift in a loving way, right? And so yes. Was that a lot of what you went through that launch, Dan?
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. I think it's really just seeing where your team is succeeding and seeing where it's struggling. Some of the keeping the finger on the pulse is, again, we've all had the leader that says, oh, if something's going wrong, I want to know about it. But have you ever had a leader that you went to and you brought your problem forward and you felt worse for doing it rather than
yes.
better? Yeah. So I think the key is, we can't address every single thing that our employees bring forward or want changed. But the key is to keep an open mind, to listen, to stop, reflect on the situation. And, there were several opportunities that were quick wins where, we drafted our employee handbook as a staff team sitting in a trailer before we hired our first hourly employee. And there were some things that, we fostered, via roundtable meetings at birthday times, or a suggestion box. If people wanted a little bit more anonymity, we just are, and certainly shop floor discussions. I mean, I think, if you show up, if you spend the time on the shop floor and you have a staff team that does as well, people are going to be honest with you if you create that safe space. And that's how you keep the finger on the pulse. I think one of the things I've been fortunate to do is be able to establish rapport with people so they feel like they can talk to me without me immediately being judgmental towards them. And that's what you have to work at.
Dan, thank you for being a great model in manufacturing. We need this as a manufacturing community. And I'll just ask you, we're going to bring this home now. So for the listeners, how do they follow you if they just want any more from you? And then NSG, I'll leave this here, is that you're personable, you're smart, and I love working with you. And you had so many chances where you could have worked at other companies. And when our core values get misaligned with our company values, that's often when we leave. You haven't left. So just bring us home on you, NSG. How do we follow? And
okay. All right. Thank you, Trevor. Yeah. So Dan Knecht, I am on LinkedIn. That's probably the best way to connect with me personally. But I do want to really plug NSG as a whole.
Right.
As you said, a rich history in glass making. We're one of the world's largest manufacturers in glass and glazing products. And, we serve the architectural and solar products, which is the division that I work in. So building products and solar energy applications. We also serve the automotive market, both original equipment and auto glass replacement, as well as we have, creative technology business unit that focuses on some really specialty things like thin micro glass used in phones and touch screens and things like that. But the thing I love about NSG, which by the way, I would ask all listeners to check them out at www.nsg.com, is, every day's been a challenge. It's great being part of a company that's been a technological innovator with a global reach, opportunities to collaborate across the globe. We have over 25,000 permanent employees,
wow.
But it's still got the family feel, Trevor. We still, we have certainly a strategy at the corporate level, but there's enough autonomy in the regional business. We recognize everything starts with the customer, and you're best suited to manage those customer relationships in the region with which those customers exist, and therefore we exist to serve those customers. So it's a fabulous organization. No company's perfect. I will be the first to say that. But I think if you're looking for a rewarding career, a career where you can sort of blaze your own trails, that's what's kept me from taking other offers I've had presented, is just the ability to kind of set my own destiny. The sky's the limit. If you're not busy or you're not challenged, you're not investing your own time and looking hard enough.
Oh, so true. And you can have a great website and have your core values on there, which I know you do, but the goal that you shared with us today, your own vulnerability and just being open and just having a real conversation, I'm so grateful that companies are more willing to do that, so that interns can make good decisions on where they work, and they're going to listen to this podcast and they're going to want to work with more people like you, Dan. So thanks so much for coming on.
Okay, thank you, Trevor.
Hey folks, appreciate you taking the time to join us today. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with someone. Haven't subscribed yet? Do it now. Remember, if you want results, the key is increasing your awareness of how you show up.